Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have honestly made a complete mess of Sickly Bernice's tap house over here. I am kinda sorry, but hey, I did save your life. Kinda, not really. I gave you some bullshit potions, but anyway, today we're gonna continue reading. Yeah, we still got a lot more books to read. Let's see, where the hell are we? Ice and Chitin. Ice and Chitin, here we are. Solid 18 pages. Alright, let's do it. Ice and Chitin by Pletius Spatek. What a fucking name. I feel like all the people that write books in this game, all of their names are just fucking out of this goddamn world. The tale dates to the year 855 of the Second Era, after General Talos had taken the name Tiber Septim and had begun his conquest of Tamriel. One of his commanding officers, Bedia of Yaloilos, Bedia, I don't know, had been surprised in an ambush while returning from a meeting with the Emperor. She and her personal guard of 5 soldiers barely escaped, and were separated from their army. They fled across the desolate, sleet-painted rocky cliffs by foot. The attack had been so sudden, they had not even the time to don armor or get to their horses. "If we can get to the Corvée Ridge," hollered Lieutenant Ascatus. God, I hate all these fucking names, dude. Gesturing toward a peak off in the mist, his voice barely discernible over the wind. "We can meet the legion you stationed in Pornac." Bedia looked across the craggy landscape through the wind-swept hoary trees and shook her head. "Not that way. We'll be stuck down before we can make it halfway to the mountain. You can see their horses' breath through the trees." She directed her guard toward a ruined old keep on the frozen isthmus of Norone, across the bay from Gorva Ridge. Jutting out on a promontory of rock, it was like many other abandoned castles in northern Skyrim. Where the fuck is this, huh? I've never heard of this fucking place. Remnants of Riemann Cyrodiil's protective shield against the continent of Akavir. As they reached their destination and made a fire, they could hear the army of the war chiefs of Danstar, behind them, making camp on the land southwest, blocking the only escape but the sea. The soldiers assessed the stock of the keep, while Bedia looked out to the fog-veiled water through the casements of the ruin. She threw a stone, watching it skip across the ice, trailing puffs of mist before it disappeared with a splash into a crack in the surface. "No food or weaponry to be found, Commander," Lieutenant Ascatus reported. "There's a pile of armor in storage, but it's definitely taken on the elements over the years. I don't know if it's salvageable at all." "We won't last long here," Bedia replied. "The Nords know that we'll be vulnerable when night falls, and this old rock won't hold them off. If there's anything in the keep we can use, find it. We have to make it across the ice floe to the ridge." After a few minutes of searching and matching pieces, the guards presented 2 very grimy, scuffed, and cracked suits of Chitin armor. Even the least proud of the adventurers and pirates who had looted the castle over the years had thought the shells of Chitin beneath their notice. The soldiers did not dare to clean them. The dust looked to be the only adhesive holding them together. "They won't offer us much protection. Just slow us down," grimaced Ascatus. "If we run across the ice as soon as it gets dark, anyone who can plan and execute an ambush like the war chiefs of Danstar will be expecting that. We need to move quickly, now, before they're any closer." Bedia drew a map of the bay in the dust, and then a semicircular path across the water, an arc stretching from the castle to the Corvée Ridge. The men should go the long way across the bay like so. The ice is thick there a ways from the shoreline, and there are a lot of rocks for cover. "You're not staying behind to hold the castle?" "Of course not." Bedia shook her head and drew a straight line from the castle to the closest shore across the bay. "I'll take one of the Chitin suits and try to cross the water here. If you don't see or hear from me when you've made it to land, don't wait. Just get to Pornac." Lieutenant Ascatus tried to dissuade his commander, but he knew that she was never she would never order one of her men to perform the suicidal act of diversion. That all would die before they reached Corvée Ridge if the warlord's army was not distracted. He could find only one way to honor his duty to protect his commanding officer. It was not easy convincing Commander Bedia that he should accompany her, but at last she relented. The sun hung low, but still cast a diffused glow, illuminating the snow with ooh god, all the fucking rhymes here. Low, glow, snow, shit, alright. The sun hung low, but still cast a diffused glow, illuminating the snow with a ghostly light, when the 5 men and 1 woman slipped through the boulders beneath the castle to the water's frozen edge. Bedia and Ascutis moved carefully and precisely, painfully aware of each dull crunch of chitin against stone. At their commander's signal, the 4 unarmored men dashed towards the north across the ice. When her men had reached the first fragment of cover, a spiral of stone jutting a few yards from the base of the promontory, Bedia turned to listen for the sound of the army above. Nothing but silence. They were still unseen. Ascutis nodded, and his eyes through the helm showing no fear. The commander and her lieutenant stepped onto the ice and began to run. When Bedia had surveyed the bay from the castle ramparts, the crossing closest to shore had seemed like a vast, featureless plain of white. Now that she was down on the ice, it was even more flat and stark. The sheets of mist rose only up their ankles, but it billowed up at their approach like the hand of nature itself was pointing out their presence to their enemies. They were utterly exposed. It came almost as a relief when Bedia heard one of the war chief's scouts whistle a signal to his masters. They didn't have to turn around to see if the army was coming. The sound of galloping hoofs and the crash of trees giving way was very clear over the whistling wind. Bedia wished she could risk a glance to the north to see if her men were hidden from view, but she didn't dare. She could hear Ascutis running to her right, keeping pace, breathing hard. He was used to wearing heavier armor, but the chitin joints were so brittle and tight from years of disuse, it was all he could do to bend them. The rocky shore to the ridge still looked at it eternity away. Still looked an eternity away. Damn typos. When Bedia felt and heard the first volley of arrows. Most struck the ice at their feet with sharp cracking sounds, but a few nearly found home, ricocheting off their backs. She silently offered a prayer of thanks to whatever anonymous shellsmith, now long dead, had crafted the armor. They continued to run, as the first rain of arrows was quickly followed by a second and a third. "Thanks, Stendarr," Ascutis gasped. "If there was only leather in the keep, we'd be pierced through and through. Now if only it weren't so rigid." Bedia felt her own armor joints begin to set, her knees and hips finding more and more resistance with every step. There could be no denying it. They were drawing closer toward the shore. But they were running much more slowly. She heard the first dreadful galloping crunch of the army charging across the floe toward them. The riders were cautious on the slippery ice, not driving their horses at full speed, but Bedia knew that they would be soon upon the 2 of them soon. The old chitin armor could withstand the bite of a few arrows, but not a lance driven with the force of a galloping horse. The only great unknown was time. The thunder of beating hooves was deafening behind them when Ascutis and Bedia reached the edge of the shore. The giant, jagged stones that strung around the beach blockaded the approach. Beneath their feet, the ice sighed and crackled. They could not stand still, run forward, nor run back. Straining against the tired metal and the armor joints, they took 2 bounds forward and flew at the boulders. The first landing on the ice sounded an explosive crack. When they rose for the final jump, it was on a wave of water so cold it felt like fire through the thin armor. Ascutis's right hand found purchase in a deep fissure. Perchance? Yeah, okay. Bedia gripped with both hands, but her boulder was slick with frost. Faces pressed to the stone. They could not turn to face the army behind them. But they heard the ice splintering. God, how many times are you going to say, "We couldn't see them, but we heard them. We couldn't see them, but we heard them approaching. They were coming. They were here. We could hear them, but we couldn't see." My lord. But they heard the ice splintering, and the soldiers cry out in terror for just an instant. Then there was no sound but the whining of the wind and the purring lap of the water. A moment later, there were footsteps on the cliff above. The 4 guardsmen had crossed the bay. There were 2 to pull Bedia up from the face of the boulder, and another 2 for Escutus. They strained and swore at the weight, but finally they had their commander and her lieutenant safely on the edge of Gorvey Ridge. By Mara, that's heavy for light armor. Yes, smiled Bedia wearily, looking back over the empty, broken ice floe, the cracks radiating from the parallel paths she and Escutus had run. But sometimes that's good. Wow. All those fucking horses. Who could have thunk that all those goddamn horses would have sunk through and just cracked through the goddamn ice there, huh? Who could have guessed? Alright, next up is Incident in Necrom. This is another 19-pager, alright. Incident in Necrom by Jonquilla Both. The situation simply is this, said fucking A. The situation simply is this, said Flaxith, his face as chiseled and resolute as any statue. Everyone knows that the cemetery west of the city is haunted by some malevolent beings, and it has been for many years now. The people have come to accept it. They buried their dead by daylight and are away before Masser and Secunda have risen and the evil comes forth. The only victims to fall prey to the devils within are the very stupid and the outsiders. It sounds like a natural solution to filtering out the undesirables, then, laughed Nitra, a tall, middle-aged woman with cold eyes and thin lips. Where is the gold in saving them? From the temple. They're reopening a new monastery near the cemetery, and they need the land cleansed of evil. They're offering a fortune, so I accepted the assignment with the caveats that I could assemble my own team to split the reward. That's why I've sought you each out. From what I've heard, you, Nitrai, are the best bladesmen in Morrowind. Nitra? Nitra smiled her unpleasant best. And you, Osmic, are the renowned burglar, though never once imprisoned. The bald-pated young man stammered as if to refute the charges before grinning back. I'll get you in where you need to go, but then it's up to you to do what you need to do. I'm no combator. Anything Nitra and I can't handle, I'm sure Masitha will prove her mettle. Flaxith said, turning to the 4th member of the party. She comes on very good references as a sorceress of great power and skill. Masitha was the picture of innocence, round-faced and wide-eyed. Nitra and Osmic looked at her uncertainly, particularly watching her fearful expressions, as Flaxith described the nature of the creatures haunting the cemetery. It was obvious she had never faced any adversary other than man and Myrrh before. If she survived, they thought to themselves, it would be very surprising. As the foursome trudged toward the graveyard at dusk, they took the opportunity to quiz their new teammate. Vampires are filthy creatures, said Nitra. Disease-ridden, you know. No shit. They say off to the west. They'll discriminately pass on their curse together with a member of other afflictions. They don't do that here so much, but still, you don't want to leave their wounds untreated. I take it you know something of the spells of restoration if one of us gets bit? I know a little, but I'm no healer, said Masitha meekly. More of a battle mage? Asked Osmic. I can do a little damage if I'm really close, but I'm not very good at that either. I'm more of an illusionist, technically. Nitra and Osmic looked at one another with naked concern as they reached the gates of the graveyard. There were moving shadows, stray specters among the wrack and ruins, crumbled paths stacked on top of crumbled paths. It wasn't a maze of a place. It could have been any dilapidated graveyard, but even without looking at the tombstones, it did not have one very noticeable feature. Filling the horizon was the mausoleum of a minor Cyrodiilic official from the Second Era, slightly exotic, but still harmonizing with the Dunmer graves in a complementary style called Decay. It's a surprisingly useful school, whispered Masitha defensively. You see, it's all concerned with Magicka's ability to alter the perception of objects without changing their physical compositions. removing sensual data, for example, to cast darkness or remove sound or smell from the ear. Removing smell, huh? That's an interesting one. It can help by a red-haired vampire woman leapt out of the shadows in front of them, knocking Plaxith on his back. Nitra quickly unsheathed her sword, but Mesitha was faster. With a wave of her hand, the creature stopped, frozen, her jaws scant inches from Plaxith's throat. Plaxith pulled out his own blade and finished her off. "That's illusion?" asked Osmic. "Certainly," smiled Mesitha. "Nothing's changed in the vampire's form, except its ability to move. Like I said, it's a very useful school." The four climbed up over the paths to the front gateway to the crypt. Osmic snapped the lock and disassembled the poison trap. The sorceress cast a wave of light down the dust-choked corridors, banishing the shadows and drawing the inhabitants out. Almost immediately, they were set on by a pair of vampires, howling and screaming in a frenzy of bloodlust. The battle was joined, so no sooner were the first two vampires felled than their reinforcements attacked. They were mighty warriors of uncanny strength and endurance. But Mesitha's paralysis spell and the weaponry of Plaxith and Nitra clove through their ranks. Even Osmic aided the battle. "They're crazy," gasped Mesitha when the fight finally ended and she could catch her breath. "Quara, the most savage of the vampire bloodline," said Plaxith. "We have to find and exterminate each and every one." Delving into the crypts, the group hounded out more of the creatures. Though they varied in appearance, each seemed to rely on their strength and claws for attacking, and subtly did not seem to be the style of any. When the entire mausoleum had been searched and every creature within destroyed, the four finally made their way to the surface. It was only an hour until sunrise. There was no frenzied scream or howl. Nothing rushed forward toward them. The final attack, when it happened, was so unlike the others that the questers were taken utterly by surprise. The ancient creature waited until the four were almost out of the cemetery, talking amiably, making plans for spending their share of the reward. He judged carefully who would be the greatest threat, and then launched himself at the sorceress. Had Plaxith not turned his attention back from the gate, she would have been ripped to shreds before she had a chance to scream. The vampire knocked Mesitha across a stone, its claws raking across her back, but stopped its assault in order to block a blow from Plaxith's sword. It accomplished this maneuver in its own brutal way, by tearing the warrior's arm from its socket. Goddamn! Osmic and Nitra set on him, but they found themselves in a losing battle. Only when Mesitha had pulled herself back up from behind the pile of rocks, weak and bleeding, that the fight turned. She cast a magical ball of flame at the creature, which so enraged it that it turned back to her. Nitra saw her opening and took it, beheading the vampire with a stroke of her sword. "So you do know some spells of destruction, like you said," said Nitra. "And a few spells of healing, too," she said weakly, "but I can't save Plaxith." The warrior died in the bloody dust before them. The three were quiet as they traveled across the dawn-lit countryside back toward Necrom. Mesitha felt the throb of pain on her back intensify as they walked, and then a gradual numbness like ice spread through her body. "I need to go see a healer and see if I've been diseased," she said as they reached the city. "Meet us at the Moth and Fire tomorrow morning," said Nitra. "We'll go to the temple and get our reward and split it there." 3 hours later, Osmic and Nitra sat in their room at the tavern, happily counting and recounting the gold marks. Split 3 ways, it was a very comfortable sum. "What if the healers can't do anything for Mesitha?" smiled Osmic dreamily. "Some diseases can be insidious." "Did you hear something in the hall?" asked Nitra quickly. When she looked, there was no one there. She returned, shutting the door behind her. "I'm sure Mesitha will survive if she went straight to the healer, but we could leave tonight with the gold." "Let's have one last drink to our poor sorceress," said Osmic, leading Nitra out of the room toward the stairs down. Nitra laughed. "Those spells of illusion. Oh god, you fucking idiot." "You fucking idiots, huh?" Nitra laughed. "Those spells of illusion won't help her track us down, as useful as she keeps saying they are. Paralysis, light, silence. Not so good when you don't know where to look." They closed the door behind them. "Invisibility is another spell of illusion," said Mesitha's disembodied voice. The golds on the table rose in the air and vanished from sight as she slipped it into her purse. The door again opened and closed, and all was silent until Osmic and Nitra returned a few minutes later. The dumbasses! I mean, my god, invisibility is like... Alright, outside, I would say paralysis is definitely the most helpful, but then second is definitely invisibility. Alright, last book for the day. How long is this? 22 pages. Let's not do that one. Legend of Liminal Bridges. I feel like we already read that, huh? Yeah, I already read that one. Can I get like a decently short book here? 10 pages, okay. Lord Jornibret's Last Dance. Lord Jornibret's Last Dance. Traditional. Woman's verse 1. Every winter season, except for the reason... I'm not fucking singing. Every winter season, except for the reason of one war or another, really quite a bother. Or another. Of one war or another, really quite a bother. The Queen of Rimmon and her consort request their vassals come and cavort. On each and every ball, the first man at the hall is Lord Ogin Jornibret of Gare. The curse of all the maidens fair, woman's refrain. Oh, dear ladies, beware. Dearest, dearest ladies, take care. Though he's a very handsome man, if you dare to take his handsome hand, the nasty little spell will be cast, and your first dance with him will be the last. Men's verse 1. At this social event, everyone who went knew the bows and stances and steps to all the dances. The Queen of Rimmon and her consort would order a trumpet's wild report, and there would be no indecision as the revelers took position. The first dance only ladies separate, away from such men as Lord Jornibret. Men's refrain. Oh, dear fellows, explain. Ooh, even rhyming with the refrain? Goddamn. Oh, dear fellows, explain. Brothers, can you help make it plain? The man's been doing this for years, leaving maidens fair in tears. Before the final tune's been blast, and her first dance with him will be the last. Woman's verse 2. Lord Ogin Jornibret of Gare watched the ladies dance on air, the loveliest in the realm, a fellow in a Ursine hide helm. Said the Queen of Rimmon and her consort have put together quite a sport. Which lady fair do you prefer? Lord Jornibret pointed her. See the bosom bob and weave, well suited for me to love and leave. Woman's refrain. Men's verse 2. The man in the mask of a bear had left the Lord of Gare. Before the ladies' dance was ending, then a trumpet sounded, portending that the Queen of Rimmon and her consort called for the men to come to court. Disdainful, passing over all the rest, Ogin approached she of bobbing breast. What the fuck? She of bobbing breast. What a fucking adjective. A bobbing breast. That's just fucking something, huh? She was rejected, saved a life of woe, for a new maiden as fair as snow. Men's refrain. Woman's verse 2. Oh, okay. Wait, what? Okay. At the first note of the band, the beauty took Ogin's hand. She complimented his stately carriage, dancing to the tune about the marriage of the Queen of Rimmon and her consort. It is very difficult indeed to comport with grace, neither falling nor flailing, wearing ornate hide and leather mailing, dancing light as the sweetest of dreams, without a single squeak of the seams. Woman's refrain. Men's verse 3. The rhythms rose and fell, no one dancing could excel. With masculine grace and syncopation, Lord Jornibret even drew admiration from the Queen of Rimmon and her consort, like a beauteous vessel pulling into port. He silently slid, bellying the leather's waist. She whispered girlishly, "The hour is late, but I've never seen such grace in hide armor. Ooh, it was a pity he knew he had to harm her." Oh. Oh. Men's refrain. Woman's verse 4. The tune beat was furious. He began to be curious. Where had the maiden been sequestered before this dance was requested? By the consort and his queen of Rimmon, I didn't see you dance with the women. My dress was torn as I came to the dance, she said, smiling in a voice deep as a man's. My maids worked quickly to repair, while I wore a suit of hide, a helm of a bear. Woman's refrain. End. Huh. Okay, yeah, not too sure what to make of that one. That one was curious. That was a curious book right there. But with that, we are another 3 books closer to being done reading all these goddamn books. Because goddamn, there are a lot of books. And I will also say, between episodes, I had noticed that this bench is also a snuggle bench. So it's not just that lady's place, it's literally just every bench in this game is a fucking snuggle bench, which is kind of disappointing. I really wish it was just that one person's bench that was the snuggle bench, but alas, it is what it is. It is what it is. But that's going to do it for today. So, yeah, thank you for watching. Hey, how's it going? We're starting to get some guests going on, rolling in here. But yeah, that's going to do it for today. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When next we return, we'll be sitting down in this chair, reading some more books. Till then, goodbye.
Cause I don't wanna see the glow without you. Refuse to even leave my home without you. Or my brain's gonna explode without you. I don't even know how to cope without you. Cause I don't wanna see the glow without you. Refuse to even leave my home without you. Or my brain's gonna explode without you. I don't even know how to cope without you.